let's clean the saddles of the block. Do the same for both sides of all the bearings to make sure there's no dust or buildup from the previous lubricant. The crank itself should be cleaned off as well. Install the main bearings and double check that the oil holes are lining up with the ones in the block. While you're at it, you should clean the caps and wipe and install the bearings for them as well.
When the motor starts up for the first time and while it's running, the crankshaft requires more lubrication than the camshaft. Cleveite's engine assembly lubricant is great for the cam journals and lobes, but it was specifically designed to provide the startup and break-in protection that even their highest quality bearings deserve. Don't forget to wipe some on the faces of the thrust bearing as well.
So far, most of the final assembly procedures have been the same as you did them for the pre-assembly with regard to the engine bearings and various components. From here on, we're going to start thinking about permanently sealing up the rest of our assembly with the gaskets from our rebuild kit. Depending on your engine type, the first final placement of your crankshaft. Of course, be really gentle as you lay it into place, and when it's set, lubricate each of the caps and then place them. From here on out, every bolt that goes in the engine is going to need to have some kind of lubricant or sealer on the threads. The main cap bolts should have some engine oil on the threads to reach the proper torque setting. For those of you with rubber rear main seals, remember to use the protector shim on the seal when you put it in the rear main cap as well. And of course, rubber or rope seals get a little bit of oil on the seal itself. The contact surface of the rear main cap needs to be clean in order to seal correctly against the silicone that's on the block. Before the main cap bolts can get torqued, they should also have some oil put on the cap where the head of the bolt is going to contact the cap. If you already put some under the head of the bolt when you did the threads, then that'll be fine.
You're going to need to have all the torque specs for your engine handy from here on. Check the engine spec section at boxwrench.net for all the most popular engine specs. If we don't have a listing for your engine, you should be able to find what you need in a repair manual.
For the final torquing on these main caps, we went in 3 increments, just like we did in pre-assembly. This engine needed 65 total, so first was 20, then 40, then finished it at 65. If you have 4 bolt mains, do the inner bolts first. Remember, don't torque whichever cap has the thrust bearing in it. When the other 4 are torqued, smack the back of the crank with a rubber mallet, or hammer against another hammer to seat the thrust bearings. Now you can go through the 3 increments to torque the cap with the thrust bearings. Now your crank is in for good.
If your motor has a one-piece rear main seal, you can click on the one-piece button for instructions. If you've already installed your 2-piece setup, click the Continue button to jump ahead. For those of you that have a 2-piece rear main seal made of either neoprene rubber or the older rope style, click the 2-piece button for your next procedure. For those of you that have crankshafts with a 1-piece rear main seal, we'll be dealing with those types of seals later. Click on the Continue button to skip ahead a bit.
Engines with a 2-piece rear seal need to have the upper half installed before the crankshaft can be lowered in place. For a neoprene rubber seal, the pointy lip will point towards the inside of the motor. When you press it in its place, use the plastic protector shim between the seal and the block to keep the rubber back of the seal from getting cut by the sharp edge of the block. For engines with a rope seal, you need to work the rope into the groove of the block and then use a large socket to tap it deeper into the groove. Then cut the excess flush with the block. Use a razor knife, but if finishing the cut gets tough, just clip it off with some cutting pliers. You can bolt the cap in upside down for some motors to install the rope seal in the rear cap. In either case, put a little oil or assembly lube on the lip or the rope so the seal won't burn out on startup.
For all types of engines, it's very important to put a dab of silicone sealer on each side of the seal where the rear cap meets the metal of the block. If you don't do this, oil is going to leak out of the rear of the block because there's no gasket here. You should also spread a little on the tips of the neoprene or rope seals as well. For a 1-piece rear main seal, you'll need to have access to the rear of the block. This type of engine uses an adapter that bolts to the block. This way, the rear main seal is fitted in after the adapter is sealed up and bolted in place. You can remove the engine from the stand if you want and install the seal, but then you'd have to put the engine right back in the stand. we're just going to wait till later to do our one-piece rear main seal so we can keep moving forward. We did seal and install the adapter because we were lucky enough to be able to get it past the engine stand adapter. If you're able to get your adapter on, great. If not, don't worry about it. We can deal with all this stuff later. Let's move on.